Well, welcome back, everyone. I think we're only missing one or two people. So for an opening prayer this afternoon, today is a very important holy day in the Catholic Church calendar. It's the feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, December the 12th. And of course, she's so important because Our Lady of Guadalupe was a vision that appeared to an indigenous man in Mexico, Juan Diego. And the important thing is that she spoke to him in his own language, his own indigenous language. And so therefore, this vision of the Virgin Mary, of Mary, is so revered by all of our brothers and sisters in Latin America. So in honor of Our Lady of Guadalupe and Mary, I'm going to just read the beautiful prayer, the Magnificat, which is given to us in the Gospel of Luke as words that Mary spoke when the angel Gabriel came to her. She said, "My soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior, for he has looked with favor on his lowly servant. From this day, all generations will call me blessed. The Almighty has done great things for me, and holy is his name. He has mercy on those who fear him in every generation. He has shown the strength of his arm, and he has scattered the proud in their conceit. He has cast down the mighty from their thrones, but has lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things, and the rich he has sent away empty. He has come to the help of his servant Israel, for he has remembered his promise of mercy, the promise he made to our fathers, to our ancestors, to Abraham, and to his children forever. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen." Well, welcome back, everybody. As an opening meditation, I've asked Doug, who's such a beautiful reader and wonderful actor, if he would read a poem by Edward Hirsch called "I'm Going to Start Living Like a Mystic." And Eddie Hirsch is a poet, a wonderful poet, award-winning poet who grew up in the Chicago suburbs and now lives in New York City. He's actually, his day job is head of the Guggenheim organization, the Guggenheim Foundation. So as a prelude to the reflection, the short reflection I'm going to give on silence, I've asked Doug to read Ed Hirsch's poem.
I am going to start living like a mystic by Edward Hirsch. Today, I am pulling on a green wool sweater and walking across the park in a dusky snowfall. The trees stand like 27 prophets in a field, each a station in a pilgrimage, silent, pondering. Blue flakes of light falling across their bodies are ciphers of a secret, an occultation. I will examine their leaves as pages in a text and consider the bookish pigeons, students of winter. I will kneel on the track of a vanquished squirrel and stare into a blank pond for the figure of Sophia. I shall begin scouring the sky for signs as if my whole future were constellated upon it. I will walk home alone, with the deep alone, a disciple of shadows in praise of the mysteries.
Thank you, Doug. I'm going to call up another set of slides and give a brief reflection on silence. And then we'll have time to share what this important contemplative practice means to us. So our topic this afternoon is esteem for silence. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to make many extended visits to the Abbey of Gethsemane outside of Louisville, Kentucky, where, of course, as we discussed, Thomas Merton lived and prayed for 27 years. And those of you who have visited the Abbey know that when you arrive, the first thing that you see, and I'll point my arrow, is a graveyard that dates back to the 19th century. And a few steps farther is the brick pathway leading to the Abbey Church, and then a sign over here where the arrow is that says silence. And just beyond that is the stone entranceway leading to the monastic cloister inscribed with the words, God alone. It is always a deeply moving experience for me to walk through that entryway and experience the profound silence of the monastery. Whenever I visit the Abbey of Gethsemane, I have the sense of entering a deeper reality, one where my soul for once, instead of my head, is leading my steps. And maybe you feel that way in your visits to Memkin. Mountain peaks, remote national parks, monasteries, and as Martha will tell us, Quaker meeting houses are among the few places left in our busy, boisterous world where a person can still practice what Saint Benedict calls esteem for silence. But most of us don't live in a monastery. We'll never climb a mountain and might visit only a few national parks in our lifetime. But in these past 3 months, because of the restrictions imposed on us during the pandemic, many of us have had the opportunity to practice esteem for silence. And we probably welcomed that respite from the busyness and noise of the world, at least at the beginning. But for others, the silence has been deafening. Yet another cross to bear in an already isolating time. And that was driven home to me when I gave a talk a few months ago to Benedictine lay associates. And one of them said, you know, I'm a widow. I live alone. I can't go to Mass on Sunday because I'm afraid to be in a large gathering. I get my groceries delivered. I no longer go to the mall. I've had no physical contact with my children, my grandchildren, or my friends in months. That's hard. So how can we readjust our thinking about silence in this current moment so that we can reclaim it for the essential contemplative practice that it is? Benedictine sister Joan Chittister speaks often about building a monastery of the heart, one that we carry with us wherever we go. And Father Ronald Rollheiser has a new book out called Domestic Monastery. It too is a recognition that a monastery is more than a physical structure. A monastery is a state of mind. A state of mind, it's also a state of mind. A state of mind propelled by the timeless monastic values of listening, community, hospitality, simplicity, humility, work, prayer, praise, and silence. Of all those values, silence might be the rarest to come by in our modern technological world. Our cell phones, the internet, social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Pinterest, and all the rest form a curtain of white noise distractions. As a society, we seem to suffer from silence deficit disorder. And yet, silence rests firmly at the heart of every religious tradition. As we discussed, when Quakers gather in a meeting house for prayer, their prayer is raised in silence. When the communion host is lifted during the consecration at the Catholic Mass, it is also a moment of profound silence within the congregation. When I wrote for the Wall Street Journal, I was assigned to write about Americans discovering the ancient Japanese tea ceremony. And what was surprising to me about this Zen ritual is that this most communal of events, the sharing of a bowl of tea, takes place without any talking. The idea is that if no one is talking, no one is dominating. We are free to release selfish thoughts and desires. Almost all activity makes me ill, Thomas Merton wrote after he had been in the monastery for several years. But as soon as I am alone and silent again, I sink into a deep peace, recollection, and happiness. And after visiting the redwood forest in California toward the end of his life, he observed, "There is so much talking that goes on that is utterly useless. It is in the sky, the sea, the redwoods that you will find answers." In other words, in the silence, everything begins to connect. Merton understood that silence is a door that opens to a truth discovered only in the heart. It forces us to be alone with the self. It brings us into more intimate contact with the one the poet Edward Hirsch called, in the poem that we just heard, the great alone. Our earliest human ancestors spent not just hundreds, but thousands of years living in nature, in the wilderness. And biologists believe we humans still carry within us, within our genes, the ability to feel silence in the body. And if we lose that capacity to feel silence, we also lose our capacity for deep listening. And then we lose an essential piece of who we are as humans. Père Jacques, a French Carmelite priest, says that we can even exude silence by our actions. He talks about the refinement and the graceful gait of deeply spiritual people. And you might know people like that, probably among the monks of Mepkin Abbey. Père Jacques says, they never slam doors. They never noisily push furniture. Their movements are never brusque. Such persons can spend an entire day in God's presence. Thus, he says, they seem to be accustomed to the eternity of God, who has the time to do everything, but is never rushed. Thus, they seem to be accustomed to the eternity of God, who has the time to do everything, but is never rushed. Lately, I've begun limiting the time I spend on my cell phone and on social media, the way a dieter learns to restrict the intake of carbs and sugar. I take email Sabbaths in which I swear off email for an entire day, for a whole weekend. It's hard, but it can be done. In her beautiful memoir, Gold in Your Memories, the Benedictine writer Macrina Whitaker talks about growing up in a farmhouse with several siblings and few opportunities for privacy. So she created what she calls a private room for herself in a cornfield. She writes, I made a little broom with tall grasses and swept an area clean. An old shirt served as a rug. There in that magic spot, I would sit for hours and dream. With most of my favorite monasteries closed now to visitors, I sometimes go to a place of solitude in my mind. I return in my imagination to a small wooden block beneath a fig tree in the backyard of my childhood home. I would go there as a child to sit and dream and write poems. I think every one of us probably has a magic spot, as Macrina Whitaker calls it, either a real one or one we can return to in the memory of the soul. And if we don't have one, can we create one, as Macrina suggests, by sweeping an area clean? A few years ago, the writer Pico Iyer gave a TED Talk on NPR on the art of keeping still. Contrasting traveling with staying in place, he observed, the best way I could develop more attentive and appreciative eyes was oddly by going nowhere, just by sitting still. Sitting still is how many of us get what we most crave and need in our accelerated lives, a break. And he goes on to say, by going nowhere, I mean nothing more intimidating than taking a few minutes out of every day, or a few days out of every season, or even a few years out of a life in order to sit still long enough to find what moves you most, to recall where your true happiness lies. Turning our back on the noise of the world, even for a short while, Pico Iyer says, is like stepping toward everything that is essential. It's about learning to love the world again. I now think of silence as a path orienting us toward right action. It is the pause between thought and action, the element that gives greater gravitas and meaning to the words we do speak and the actions we do take. In silence, we not only learn to love the world again, as Pico Iyer suggests, we also rediscover our inner world, and once there, create a space where God can discover us. Let's take a couple of moments of silence to reflect on what we heard, maybe one of the quotes that was mentioned, maybe one of the images that you saw struck you. And then we'll reflect on a few questions. Here's a few questions that we might be able to reflect on together in the big group. Do you have a magic spot where you can practice esteem for silence? Has your experience, or how has your experience of silence changed during the pandemic? What's been hard? What's been welcome? Have we merely replaced the interactions we had before the virus with extra time talking on the phone, texting, connecting in social media, meeting through Skype or Zoom? And how can silence be a teacher, a healer, a source of comfort and peace? Okay.
Judith, I'm sorry, can you repeat that last question?
Yes, it was, how can silence be a teacher, a healer, or a source of comfort and peace? So I'd like just to open it up and see what is some of your experience of silence? What role has silence played in your life, and how has it changed over time? Just whatever, whatever comes to mind. Those questions were suggested questions for reflection, but you can weigh in any way that you like.
The story of the woman in the cornfield who made the room for herself. I didn't catch her name, unfortunately, but that really startled me because I had a flashback that actually, since my earliest memories as a child, I mean, literally my first like consciousness of being a human being, from then on through my life, I've always had what I called a secret place. And it varied depending on where we were living or, other circumstances, but there was always a place that I could retreat to and be completely silent. It was usually a place, in some nature spot that was as remote as possible. And so I guess silence was always that silence itself was my sacred place. And so I had to find a physical space because I still don't have the wherewithal to shut out the world. Like in centering prayer, the veterans say, oh, well, if you're really good at it, you can do it in an airport, I'm not there yet. So these secret places have had a huge significance to me. So I'd love to read her, more of what she wrote about that. It's amazing.
I'm going to put it in the chat room. Macrina Whitaker. Okay. Oop. It just went to you, Victoria. I'm sorry. Macrina Whitaker. You want to send it to everybody, Victoria, and we can continue with the conversation. I apologize.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Send it to you, only
Thank
you.
you.
So whenever I come to a group like this, I feel like the neophyte because people have been studying this so long. It's just been the last few years for me. But silence has become, and the present moment, and the silence has become the most important to me, incredibly important to me. So every morning I spend 20 minutes in centering prayer, just like you were talking about, I think, Victoria. And I have a little spot. I have a place called my library where I go every morning, and then I'll write a haiku. And then I've got something else. I try to do something generous every morning, just tiny, but something, and write about something grateful. So that's in a silent spot, my spot. The dogs may roll in, but if Stephen Covey years ago called it the daily private victory. He said in the morning, I used to teach Covey stuff a long time ago, but he would say, I start each morning with a daily private victory, something like that. And for me, once I got into that habit, if I miss that, I'm more anxious. That is an important part of my day. So.
That's
And
great.
you kind of have to, I've had this conversation with other people and they say, well, I can't find 5 minutes. Well, sometimes you just get up a half hour early or something to carve out that time. Sorry, Judith.
No, I love that. The daily private victory. That's really good. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Pete, yes.
I have a very similar sort of thing that I do. I mentioned yesterday how I spend about 45 minutes to an hour in prayer and thought and other sorts of things. If I don't get to do that, I can find a way during the day to do it at least a little bit. If I if I get up too late, I still give myself some time to have that period. But I really need that every day, and I find it quite essential. Usually, I have my dog with me, and yeah, I call him my prayer buddy. He's lying down next to me over here, and sometimes he'll be on my lap, but it's very nice. But during the rest of the day, silence will be something that I'll try to cultivate, especially being in meetings where I might have the tendency to want to say something. I'll just be quiet and let things go for a while. And it's been funny that sometimes a person or two will say, "Hey, Pete, why are you being so quiet?" I'm listening. So silence is a very, very good thing, and I can cultivate it pretty often during the day. And my special spot is where I was this morning. And I have a chair, lots of windows. I have lots of books that I use. But it's silence is really an essential part of my day. I was wondering, and maybe everyone else can kind of share about this. I was wondering how much personality has a function to do with this, and more specifically, introversion and extroversion, and the middle ground of ambiversion, where you're a little of both, but you might lean one way or the other. I suspect that maybe obtaining silence is something that's a little bit handier for introverted people than extroverted people, but I don't know. But myself being an ambivert but leaning toward introversion, I find it pretty easy to do the sort of silence that I'd like, even if I'm in an airport or a meeting or somewhere, because I can withdraw to the extent that I need to.
How would you answer Pete's question? Is it harder if you're an extrovert? I see Martha smiling. Did you want to share, Martha?
There we go. I raised my hand instead of hitting the mute button, taking it off. You know what I miss the most? The thing that struck me, I guess, is I miss the corporate silence of the meeting house. You know, there's a there's a huge value in being able to find that silence on your own and to have that practice yourself. I mean, there's nothing like being alone with yourself. But we do still have Zoom meetings for worship, you know, so that we are together, and it's allowed folks that normally wouldn't come, like people that live in Ohio that come, that used to live with us in Virginia that come. But it reminded me of, the amazing thing about our meeting at Lincoln is there are people in our meeting who their families helped to found it in the 1700s. This is in Lincoln, Virginia. And it's, you know, that amazes me, that continuity of practice and of faith, right? But John Greenleaf, one of our longtime members who's no longer with us, and one of the old families, their name was Janney, this was her favorite poem, Arlene Janney, and it was John Greenleaf Whittier. It was called The Meeting, and I'm just going to read one little stanza, because it kind of captures the sense of what we call a called meeting, you know, that we're all together. And so he says, "And so I find it well to come for deeper rest to this still room. For here the habit of the soul feels less the outer world's control. The strength of mutual purpose pleads more earnestly our common needs. And from the silence multiplied by these still forms on either side, the world that time and sense have known falls off and leaves us God alone."
Oh, that was a perfect poem. You've got to email me the reference to that. That's, you know, said perfectly what we were talking about. Yeah. Well, that's a really good point, Martha. I'm wondering about, you know, what prayer has been like now that we can't gather in large groups. I used to be a daily mass goer. I haven't been to mass since March, you know, because my husband has a pre-existing condition, and I just can't risk going around a lot of people who don't have masks on or whatever. So I'm wondering about what it's been like now that you don't have those, you know, the formal meetings for the Quakers or our mass. Centering prayer groups can't meet in person. They're meeting online. What's it been like?
Illuminata back at Mepkin, she's had her hand up.
Actually, the code, you know, the quarantine and all of the difficulties have not changed in terms of like my time in silence, because I'm retired. So I had a lot of it already. But I have found that having these retreats and other events that Metkin helps to organize has been really vital, because it's not the same, obviously, but I have built a new community, a different community, but it's a wonderful community, so that's been really helpful. But my comment was actually about you said, you made a comment, something about the memory of the soul, and I was very struck by that. What is the source for that? Because I've been thinking about the issue of silence, is how we crave it, but how difficult it is, both to cultivate it, to find physical time, etc. And I hadn't thought of this poem for years. And all of a sudden, this line from Wordsworth came to me, right? "Trailing clouds of glory do we come from God, who is our home." And I thought, you know, I think that's why we all want it and need it so badly, because it's where we came from, right? And so we've carried a little bit of that with us here. And so I was just really intrigued by that memory of the soul. Can you say a little bit more?
It's just a phrase that I wrote. It wasn't from anybody else, but, you know, it was referring to these memories that are so deep within us. You know, that memory of sitting under that fig tree is so deep inside of me that that's my magic spot that I can go to, and I can go there, and literally I could be in a crowd and just almost feel myself physically float above the crowd when I go to that spot. I haven't been in those kinds of crowds now for 9 months, but you know, I was talking about those memories that are so deep within us. And what you said, Illuminata, about coming from silence, how true that is. When we think about the womb, you know, we come from the silence of the womb. And so that's a very profound thought. Thank you that you just gave to me.
Thank you. Yours is beautiful too.
Father Garrick, I'm wondering about you. I'm wondering if the silence of the Trappist life is easier for people who are introverts. You know, certainly Paul Quenin is a quintessential extrovert, and yet he's thrived in his monastic vocation.
I think most people might say that it's a little easier for introverts, but not to imply that extroverts can't live a deeply contemplative life, you know, particularly if they're sensate extroverts who you have this attention to detail, etc. So I think that oftentimes extroverts get a bad rap, you know, for not being contemplative, you know. One of the reflections I had on silence in the pandemic and Eucharist is that not being able to receive Eucharist in person, I think has refocused us on a long tradition in the church, which is spiritual communion. And I think sometimes we want to too narrowly confine the presence to the Eucharist or to a few minutes at Mass. One of the hidden gifts, I think, of the pandemic is that it has helped us to re-establish our connection with nature. And most people I talk to say it's in nature where they have had the most profound experience of silence, you know. It may be heretical, but I have a spiritual director who says Christ is as present in nature as he is in the Eucharist. And so I think that that we can start mining some of the hidden gifts that are hidden in the pandemic. I think, as you said earlier, it's kind of made Trappists of all of us, you know, in some ways.
Well, thank you, Father Garrick. That was really profound what you said about the Eucharist. Because I've been thinking about that a lot. I mean, having been a daily Mass goer, and I always say, you know, people ask me, why do you stay a Catholic? How can you stay a Catholic with all the corruption and all the scandal? And I say, well, I would miss the Eucharist, you know, very simply. I love the Eucharist. And so you know, I've been trying to write about this myself and thinking about how can I write it without bringing all the Catholic conservatives down on me, about how we have to broaden what we think of as Eucharist. You know, I think every time we sit down to break bread with someone, that's Eucharist. You know, that's a form of Eucharist. Go ahead, Father.
I would just add to that, if we can't see Christ in one another, we're not going to be able to see Christ in the host either.
Yeah. So that to me has been a very profound change that the pandemic has brought about. My concept of what is Eucharist and what is prayer. You know, is prayer now my private prayer has become much deeper because it has to be. I don't have that daily Mass infusion every day. What else? Who else would like to share?
Jessica's got her hand up.
Yes, please, Jessica.
Okay, well, I really miss going to daily Mass as well. I Zoom it online. But one thing I can do now is my parish offers face-to-face reconciliation. So going to confession is like my communion. And I'm so grateful for that. I just wanted to make a comment on one of the things you said about in silence, when no one is talking, no one is dominating. That is so incredibly important. And then I was thinking along that line of how you have to be silent to listen. And then if you're a good speaker, you have to be silent. You have to silence all the other voices except the voice that you're using and what you're thinking about to be an effective speaker. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a very important point about the listening. Yeah. You know, when I went into television journalism, I asked an experienced producer, what can you tell me? How can you tell me? Because I had been in print journalism. What's the most important thing? And he said, you've got to listen very carefully to what people are saying. You can't be thinking about your next question or, what you have to do after this. You have to really focus on what that person is saying. And that was being very Benedictine. That whole emphasis on listening.
Yeah, and perhaps to listen to what they're not saying.
Yes. Absolutely.
So Martha's up next with a question or a comment.
Oh, I think I put my hand up earlier, just and then went ahead and talked. So I didn't really have anything to add other than I think silence is so important as a time for discernment.
Right.
And Doug has his hand up too.
Yes, Doug.
This has been a wonderful sharing of ideas, a lot sort of percolating in my mind. But something came to me that I've thought of in other contexts before, quite a bit in my life, but never really in this specific context, in terms of a place, a place of prayer, or where you go back to in your heart or your mind. As a young actor in college, we performed in a theater at Monmouth University, in fact, called the Guggenheim Theater. You mentioned Guggenheim earlier, Judy. And after we would sort of all be in our dressing rooms and prepping ourselves and getting our costumes and our makeup on, we'd get the call from the stage manager, 5 minutes. It's time to take your places. And I always had a private place backstage in the darkness that I would go and sit. And quite frankly, it's one of the places I most felt was home in my whole life, was backstage in the dark in an atmosphere of silence. And I wanted to bring up that word because, of course, I think Cassidy, our Merton friend and filmmaker, Cassidy Klein, has documented this idea of there are so many different types of silence. The idea that silence is one thing, it's like saying pasta, pasta, it's spaghetti, right? No, the varieties of pasta are infinite. You gotta go to Italy. There's so many gradations and textures and layers of silence. And that silence was pregnant with possibilities before a performance, because there was a communion of people awaiting a live experience. Something was about to unfold. Something was about to present itself to them that they had not seen before. And a dialogue was going to ensue between the actors and the audience. And I was about to become someone else, which in and of itself had a degree of transcendence to it. And it was such an intimate thing. And I think that word too speaks of what we're talking about, the intimacy of silence, and why people are so frightened of it, and even brand it heretical in Christian circles, because they're so afraid. And so they project their own fear of silence, and they say, well, the devil's going to come get you if you sit in silence, or the Buddhists are going to come get you. Somebody's going to come get you. And really, who's going to come get you is you. That's who's going to come get you, And it also made me think of this wonderful quote of Jacob Needleman, because we're talking about, someone mentioned centering prayer. And I remember when I went on my first centering prayer retreat, I left and wrote in my journal, this is like oxygen. I will have to do this for the rest of my life. I will need this like oxygen. And Jacob Needleman, I'll finish with this one, said, "To think about God is to the human soul what breathing is to the human body." Mm. And I thought that was just a beautiful way of bringing them together. This idea of thinking about God and the necessity and the vitality of that as breathing is to the body. It nurtures us without end. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Doug. Gosh, that was great. That was so profound. Yeah. Thank you.
Melissa's got her hand up.
Yes, first of all, just I wanted to say simply that I loved hearing about Macrina Whitaker saying about the cornfield, just because when I was a little girl, I used to make rooms in the cornfield. So I'd never heard anybody else talk about that before, and that was just really lovely to hear. So thank you. And also, when I was a little girl, I used to spend just huge amounts of time up in trees. I had a particular pine tree that I was kind of my best friend as a child, and so I think that during the pandemic, I've been spending I always spend time outside, but I've probably been spending more and more time outside, and I appreciated both Father Garrick's comments and also Thomas Merton's comments about just being outside, because I was talking to my husband about this retreat, and we were talking about just where our contemplative spot is, and he said, sometimes I just go outside and I turn around 360 degrees and I'm just totally amazed at everything I see. And so I'm grateful to spend as much time outside as I do, and to listen outside and to wonder outside. And the last thing I wanted to say was following up on Father Garrick talking about the broadening our sense of the Eucharist. And I know Martin Luther isn't maybe the most popular person in the Catholic world, but one time someone asked him how he knew for sure that Christ was in the Eucharist, and he said, "Because Christ is in my cabbage soup."
Mm.
And I
That's
just always
great.
thought that was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Christ is in my cabbage soup. Love that. Love that. Got to write that down. Now, Victoria's been putting some things in the chat room, and maybe she'd just like to share that for folks who haven't had a chance to look at the chat room or don't know how to look at the chat room.
Well, actually, my mind is going, this is so stimulating. My mind is going like a rabbit. So I'm typing and then waiting to with other ideas I want to ask or speak. But now that I'm here, there was something that was just burning in my head about, it was something that Doug said about, it was about centering prayer, but what was, oh dear. Yeah, I'm it's going so quickly now. I put my hand up when I had the idea, and then now it's left me again. I'll come back, but I don't know, with sharing, I was glad that Illuminata, hi Illuminata, if you can hear me. It's great that she's here, she's hidden. With Wordsworth, his Ode to Tintern Abbey, I'm not sure which quote she used, but a lot of his writing, Wordsworth's writing, is about solitude and the importance of nature. And his Ode to Tintern Abbey is so beautiful because it describes exactly what we've been talking about all morning, that how his memory of that landscape sustained him. One of the verses is something like, oft in crowded cities and pubs or something. This memory of the landscape was what sustained him in these kind of urban, turbulent settings. And so it's very, it's Wordsworth, so it's great. And then the Eucharist idea was this, that I remember that Teilhard de Chardin and also Charles Foucault, Teilhard de Chardin talked about the cosmic Eucharist. But Charles Foucault, if I remember correctly, realized that, he only had, when he first went into his hermitage, he had enough the consecrated host for a certain period of time, and then of course it ran out, and then he was isolated, and so he had to, you know, rethink the Eucharist in his own celebration of the liturgy, and so it, you know, transformed into a spiritual experience, which I've thought about a lot, because like you, Judith, I haven't, for health reasons, I haven't been to Mass physically since March. And it's, at first it was, and I went to daily Mass. So at first it almost killed me. I thought, I'm just gonna die. I thought of that saint who was nurtured only on the host for decades or something. And I thought, I get it totally, I could do that too. And so it was really hard. And I keep fighting with that, you know, trying to make it spiritual so I can feel sustained. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Victoria. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to type here, so I can't answer the chat quickly. The poem, Victoria, is Ode on Intimations of Immortality. That's where I quoted it. Sorry, thank you.
Ode on Intimations of Mortality by Wordsworth, right?
Yeah, that's what I thought. And
Okay, did anybody else have their hand up? I'm missing
Jonathan
anybody?
put his up.
Hi, Judith, and everyone, I'm sorry. I've been here the whole time, but I'm having trouble with my camera. In other words, you can hear me, I guess.
Yes.
I can't get on. I can see you all, but you can't see me. This is this session has struck a memory with me. I grew up in the home of my aunt and my uncle, and as a young boy, they had an attic in their house, and I loved to go up into that attic. I don't remember, they had books up there that I loved to open up and look at. And I don't remember the attic as being a place of prayer or anything like that. But I do remember what I loved to do in the attic was to go to the window of the attic, very small window, which faced out into the park next door and the street. And what I loved, and I loved it all the time when I did it, was that I could see them, but they couldn't see me. So I loved that I could see people. And I don't remember rarely seeing people because it was not that kind of a street. But this idea of not being seen. And I just remembered, I'm associating while I'm listening to everyone, that Merton in his journals has a line where he's getting tired, I think, of his writing or his notoriety, and he says it's just an exclamation: "Not to be heard, not to be seen." That's all he puts: not to be heard, not to be seen. And that led me to another association: this whole idea of disappearing.
Mm.
Words, I am disappearing. I am no longer seen or heard, and yet I'm there. I don't know what that's about, but anyway, I wanted to say that. And the last thing I'd like to say is just to add, I squelched myself on Friday night, last night, from saying my lines. So I would just like to say them before we
Please.
go.
I was going to ask you to do that, so please do it.
No, and this is on our topic, really, of I guess silence. Anyway, my lines were: my housemates gone for 5 weeks. How the world might be when I died to it. Quiet in bed, my body whispers, we are not afraid. So.
Isn't that beautiful? Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you. Yes.
I'm sorry,
yes.
I can't see you all. But
people
anyway.
are giving you a big applause and putting their hands together and bowing in reverence to what you just said. Thank you. That was beautiful. Yeah. It gets back to something that we were talking about, whether silence is easier for introverts. And you look at Merton, who it is said of Merton, he never had an unwritten thought, and was certainly writing to Boris Pasternak and writing to kids in high school, and yet there was that sense of him of wanting to just disappear, and that his last known words that he said, or his last heard words at least, were and so now I will disappear. And then he went off to take his shower, and the rest is history. He got electrocuted in his room in Bangkok. So it's quite a paradox. Yes, Michelle, was that a hand up?
Yeah, that's a hand up. I regret I'm gonna have to leave here shortly, but what I wanted to say about silence too was, I grew up across the street from the church that was always open. So in the noise of my world of pre-adolescence and adolescence, I got to hang out at the church, and it was just in pure silence always. And what I've noticed throughout my life is that to truly be healed, we need silence. There's not enough noise, not enough talking, not enough counseling, spiritual direction or anything. Until the person sits in silence, that's where true healing deeply begins. We can talk and talk and talk all we want, but I've discovered that silence is more rich than anything.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle.
And Merry Christmas to everybody.
Oh, thank you. You too. We'll see you again, I hope. What about the flip side of that before we move on? I'm haunted by what that woman said at one of the talks that I gave, that the silence was killing her. She didn't have physical contact with anybody in these months. I'm wondering if anybody's had that experience as well of silence, and what we could say about that experience.
Victoria has her hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Victoria.
It's an ancient computer.
Okay, you're muted again.
It's a very old computer. Am I on now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Once again, I'm one I'm one subject behind here. When I put up my hand, it was because I suddenly remembered what Doug's statement reminded me of. So is that okay to
please? Yes.
Rewind for a second? No, because it totally resonated with me, because I'm a musician, and I performing is my life. And too, those are precious moments for me before I go on stage, because that's sort of, unfortunately, the pianist I work with is the opposite, and he's always like talking, and he's on his cell phone, and he's twittering. So, but it just reminded me of a really beautiful thing. My daughter is a dancer, and when she was still in high school, she was in a performance of a very profound dance work. I encourage you to look at it if you can find it on YouTube. It's the Missa Brevis by Zoltan Kodály. And so the music is music that he wrote in his suffering about the destruction of his beloved Hungary. And Jose Limon, Limon, is the one who choreographed it. He's a great choreographer. But anyway, it's a very profound work, very, very cathartic. And my daughter told me that, and they were just high school kids, but about 5 minutes before the curtain went up for every performance, they would all meet in the darkness on stage, because the curtain was down, and they would make a circle. And then nobody said a word, and they would all just inhale together as a group, and then exhale, and then do this a number of times to enter into that sacred space that they were then going to perform for the public. And I just thought that was so beautiful, because it really showed also the sacredness, I think, of the work that those of us do who are in the performing arts, because it's sort of tapping into God's creativity. So sorry that was so long, but ever since Doug spoke, I was like, oh, but I'd forgotten what it was. But I just wanted to say about silence and the sort of the vita activa and the vita contemplativa. I think it's so important to remember from Jesus's own example that he seemed like he was a total extrovert insofar as he was out and about healing, and he was so spontaneous, responding to every circumstance as it came up and open to the moment, and then these huge crowds. And then when he wasn't with them, he was with his disciples teaching. And it's so easy to overlook those tiny little sentences in the Gospels that say, and then he went up on a mountain to pray, or then he went away by himself for a while to be with his Father. That I think, so many people who are, in these vocations forget that silence is a key part of sort of being able to be the so-called extrovert, and reach the people. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Victoria. Anybody else?
Father Garrick has got his hand up.
Another comment on the introvert extrovert. One of the experiences I have in the monastery is watching sometimes off the wall extroverts talk themselves into silence. And it's just a beautiful thing to see when it happens. They crave the silence, but they also continue to remain extroverts. So I just think that's interesting.
Very interesting.
Matilda's got her hand up.
Yes.
I think that I tend to disagree that Jesus was extrovert. I think he was, I identify more with him as a social introvert. He was, while he was with everyone and doing everything that he was doing, when he needed time to be with his Father, that's when we went to the mountains. And so I am really an introvert, but it doesn't mean that I'm not social. I like meeting people, talking to them, all sort of things. But when time comes to recoup or to re-energize, I do love silence. That's when I need my little corner in here with my lights, and these lights can go down and so on. And so that was something that I wanted to mention, which I think it's different being introvert than being lonely. I like being by myself as much as I like being with other people. So I would say I don't mind if I have to have lunch by myself, or if I was in a business trip, being by myself, it was okay. Not everyone has that luxury. Some people feel really bad if they don't have another person in front of them. That's just personality, I guess. I just wanted to share something about communion. As a communion minister here in Arlington, I've missed serving communion since March. Actually, the last time that I served was Sunday after Ash Wednesday, when I was even able to give ashes to my community, in that specific mass. And I need to say that I was very corrected, because for the first few days, I even sat here or wherever I was attending mass on Zoom, and a couple of times I did bless my own piece of bread and gave my communion. And then I said, you know what? This is not the way it goes. This is something spiritual. And so last Saturday, I went by the parish and went to see if the church was open so that I could pray by the tabernacle, which is something that I really have been doing whenever I can. And to my surprise, there was a communion ceremony, 3 little girls with the families all spread out, and I was able to have communion right after the families were done. It felt really good. It's felt really good. I need to attest that as much as I enjoy now the spiritual communion that we get every Sunday, that kind of felt different. It was like going back to the source. But what I'm trying to say, what I want to say is that we need to move on from the conservative views. So I just wanted to give an unsolicited advice, Judy. You say you don't want to write because you don't want to get all the conservatives on top of you. You will get them no matter what. So you just go ahead and write, because there are so many of us who follow your thoughts that there will be more benefit than maybe the personal cost to you having to deal with them.
Well, thank you, because I'm gonna do it, because I've really been thinking about it a lot. And Jim Forrest, the great peace activist, Jim Forrest, who was with Catholic Worker, he's put some things out on Facebook. So I thought, well, if Jim Forrest could approach this hot potato, maybe I could about looking at Eucharist a little differently. So thank you, Matilda. Thank you so much. And thank you for your whole house, looking behind you looks like a monastery. So, and with those beautiful chimes that you showed us last night, that was beautiful. You might have to do that at the end of our retreat again. Just play those chimes as we go out. Well, we're almost to the end of our time together. By the way, I don't want to cut off the conversation if anybody who didn't have an opportunity to share because we didn't see your hand or what have you.
The last hand raised is Mary Ellen.
Good, Mary Ellen, thank you.
Thank you. To respond to the woman who is a widow and was having trouble with the silence, I'm a widow, and I remember way back in mid-March when we first went into lockdown, the silence, and not the silence, but just that expanse of time was, it just incited restlessness in me. And since then, what I've noticed is there's some new anchors in my life, besides the Mepkin and the Mass in the morning or the Tuesday, Thursday contemplative prayers. A new anchor for me is Examine in the evening. And to have an app that gives me a different focus each day, it seems perfect. It's randomized, but it's perfect, of course. And to see that it's not necessarily silence, it's dialogue with God. And it has a fruitfulness to it and a fullness that I truly consider a blessing, along with many of the other things in a very, very difficult time. And I've spoken.
Wow, that's interesting that you found anchors. I like that, how you describe them as anchors. Yes. What are going to be our anchors if this goes on for another 6 months, which it just might well. So thank you, Mary Ellen, for that. Well, one thing we didn't get to this morning was you may wonder why I gave you in your packet those mindfulness meditations of Thich Nhat Hanh. And, part of it was to show that, spirituality is expansive. We can learn so much from the other traditions. I'm so glad to have Martha here and, sharing some Quaker wisdom with us. We don't have the lock on truth. But those, let me see if I can call the mindfulness meditations up. Can people see that? Okay, good. I suppose there's a way to make it bigger. I don't know. Can you see it okay? Okay. Well, maybe somebody would like to read them because they're really fun to read. And I think that I always like to give people something to take home with them to think about after the retreat. And maybe just thinking about something you do every day. Like, for me, I'm a cook. So sometimes I write mindfulness verses about my cooking, or brushing your teeth, or making the bed, whatever. To look at the sacredness of that action. What is what is the sacredness in it? So let's maybe just read a couple of these together because they're so fun. And who would like to read the wakefulness one? Waking up, rather. How about somebody who hasn't had an opportunity to share?
I think Jan is volunteering.
Thank you.
Okay. Waking up. Waking up this morning, I smile. 24 brand new hours are before me. I vow to live fully each moment and to look at all beings with eyes of compassion.
That's just great. I love that. Here's another one. Who'd like to read Brushing My Teeth? Doug, are you there?
I'll do it.
Okay, thank you.
Brushing my teeth and rinsing my mouth. I vow to speak purely and lovingly with right speech. A flower blooms in the garden of my heart.
Isn't that amazing?
Ever since I read this for the first time, and then I learned about the questions that they included in the Benedict rules for speaking, I made this my own thing every day. I think there is something that you need to think if it's useful, if it's at something, so it helps me, even though if I am not talking to many people, still.
Yeah, you'll never look at brushing your teeth the same way again. How about using the phone? Who'd like to read that one?
I'll do it.
Thank you.
Using the phone. Words can travel 1,000 miles. May my words create mutual understanding and love. May they be as beautiful as gems, as lovely as flowers.
That's a great one. Makes you think. Okay. Following the breath, I think is, oh no, walking, okay. Oh no, there's a few more. Following the breath. Okay. Who'd like to do that one?
I can do it.
Okay.
Following the breath, breathing in, I calm my body. Breathing out, I smile. Dwelling in the present moment. I know this is a wonderful moment.
I think that's the name of the book this came from. It's Wonderful Moment, Wonderful Something Else. I can't think of it right now. Walking meditation. That sounds like a good one. Yeah.
Walking meditation. The mind can go in 1,000 directions, but on this beautiful path, I walk in peace, with each step, a gentle wind blows. With each step, a flower blooms.
Empty bowl.
This is Melissa. I can read that. Empty bowl. My bowl, empty now, will soon be filled with precious food. Beings all over the earth are struggling to live. How fortunate we are to have enough to eat.
Oh, that is so meaningful at this moment that we're in, where people are struggling so much. Oh, here's one that I love because I hate doing the dishes, but now I like it after reading Thich Nhat Hanh. Who wants to do washing the dishes?
You should read it, Judith, since you like it so much.
Okay. Washing dishes. Washing the dishes is like bathing a baby Buddha. The profane is the sacred. Everyday mind is Buddha mind. That's what I have to keep thinking when I wash the dishes. Touching the earth.
I'll do that one.
Okay.
Touching the earth. Earth brings us to life and nourishes us. Earth takes us back again. We are born with every breath.
Right. Who was it just before was talking about breath? Yeah. And then I don't know if this will go down further. That may be as far as it goes. Oh no, there it goes. That's, I guess, one more. Yeah, one more. Who'd like to do the last one?
Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Greeting someone. A lotus for you. A Buddha to be.
Oh, that's a really good one, because the lotus is really important, and the lotus flower is huge in Buddhism. So I share those to, to say, to take away from our retreat, maybe a new meditation practice, which is to take something that you do every day. Like I said, making the bed, making a bowl of rice, dusting the furniture. I live with my computer. I don't know about you. And I love this book. I'm going to try to show it here, but I got to get my glasses on. Zen 24/7. Is anybody familiar with that book, Zen 24/7? Philip Toshio Sudo. And he's got like all these, he takes, like he looks at everything, everything you could possibly think of, and writes like a little Zen meditation. For example, he writes about the alarm clock, shaving, cup of coffee, donut, makeup, hairstyle. And he has these little things, little meditations to go with them. And, sometimes my husband hears me yelling and he's like, who are you yelling at? I'm yelling at the computer because it's not doing what I want. So it's like, I came across this Zen computer meditation, which helped me a lot. So I'll just read this briefly and then we'll wrap up. In this technological age, few machines have done more to change our lives than the computer. But dealing with change lies at the heart of Zen study. If Zen is to be an every moment practice, then our time with the keyboard and the mouse is part of that practice as well. We can start our practice with one simple gesture, by nodding to the machine. In the art of Japanese swordmanship, the samurai bow to their swords before and after training as a way of showing reverence for the power and for its power and significance in life. By giving the computer a nod, we show similar respect for the power placed at our fingertips. Many of us depend on technology to make a living. By nodding to the computer, we recognize its contribution to our lives. Nodding also thanks the unseen hands and minds who helped to create our machine. A computer is not born on a store shelf. It comes from a long line of scientists, engineers, inventors, programmers, mathematicians, designers, and manufacturers. The spirit of all of them exists in every machine. By nodding, we silently thank those people for what they gave to make the tool in front of us. If we learn to show respect this way, an internal transformation takes place. The machine looks less soulless in our eyes. We become aware of the interplay between tool and user and start to recognize the interconnectedness, the oneness of all things. So I better start nodding to my computer instead of yelling at it. All right, if I have missed a question that anybody put in the chat room, or you didn't get to ask it in person, please email me. I'm happy to respond. I apologize if I missed your question or forgot it. Please send your haiku to me. Some people have already done that and they're terrific. I'm going to try to collate them and get them out to you either under my email or maybe Joy's. I don't know however she would prefer to do it. And then I would just like to end with this song.
Hey, Judy, sorry to
Yes.
interrupt, but I just wanted to encourage you to make a little announcement about January 31st.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Doug. I'll just say a little bit and then I'll turn it over to you. Doug is going to be doing a retreat called Heart Speaks to Heart, which was inspired by something Jonathan had said a week ago in a talk, Jonathan. Heart Speaks to Heart. Merton's, give it to me again, Doug. Merton's Witness
Friendship.
to Friendship. Merton's Witness to Friendship. And it's a 2-part retreat. It's geared toward people who are interested in Merton, but it's open to anybody. And as Doug is going to be talking about, tell me your part of the title again, Doug.
Sure. So my half of the retreat is titled Merton and Me, Haunted by Intimacy, Friendship, Freedom, and the Fire of God's Love.
Okay. And I'll be doing the second half of the retreat. And you'll get to meet Brother Paul Quinnen, because he and I are going to do it together. And ours is, what's our title, Doug? A monk and a journalist?
Yes, and I don't have it in front of me, but the subtitle has to do with a dialogue of qualities that you've shared over the years together.
Yeah, I think it's something like a monk and a journalist explore life's big questions. And it's Brother Paul and I talking about our friendship in letters. We have a friendship, physical friendship, but we also have this years-long friendship in letters that we've now turned into a book. And the letters are about all kinds of things, like when do you know when to leave a job? Believe it or not, he has a lot of interesting things to say about that, because monks have to work, right, Father Garrett? All the monks have jobs in the monastery. And we talk about struggles with meditation, struggles with prayer, dealing with disappointment, dealing with illness. So all these things that we've corresponded with each other over the years, we've now put that into a book, and we're going to talk about that friendship and how it developed, and what we've learned from each other, I guess you could say. And it's all, why it's in this Merton retreat is because it's all been inspired by Merton, who had what he called, and
it's his birthday, of course, too.
January 31st. This is 106th birthday, I believe it'll be. And, Merton had what he called an apostolate of friendship, where he wrote to all these people, to poets, to writers, to theologians, to, as Jonathan mentioned, kids in school. Kids in school would write him and he'd write back to them. And he wrote, I think 1,500 letters is the general consensus, that he wrote at least 1,500 letters in his 53 years. So it's all been inspired by Merton. It's sponsored by Mepkin, and there should be an announcement coming up pretty soon. Okay. Did I do okay?
Just like to say we'll be taking reservations for that very soon. So keep checking our website. Before you conclude with your song, Judith, I wonder if I would like to invite people in some way to express our appreciation for the deepening experience you've provided us these 2 days. And so one of the rituals we have here at Mepkin is what we call an honoring ritual. So we would like just people to take a moment to think of 1 or 2 qualities that you have brought to this Zoom retreat that has made it such an enriching experience for us. So when you have 1 or 2 qualities that you would like to honor Judith, or I honor you for, then just raise your hand and I'll call on you.
This is going to make me cry, I think.
Well, crying's not a bad thing. Well, I would just begin, Judith, by honoring you for the way that you kind of see everything as pulsating with the divine, and for the perhaps some new ways you've invited us to see how important pause is to access the divine in everything.
Thank you, Father.
Mary Ellen's got her hand up.
Judith, thank you for how affirming you are of our efforts to find new ways of pausing.
Jonathan?
Judith, when I think of you now, I'm going to think of vivacious spirituality.
Whoa.
Thank you.
Martha?
Thank you for giving hope to recovering, crazy people like, that are overactive like me. And I also want to thank you for your loving hospitality for this little Quaker. I do feel a real sense of heart with Catholics. I grew up in a small New York town where we had a lot of Catholics. We had to fish on Fridays and all that. And I actually played in in your folk masses back in the day, in the Catholic folk masses. So it feels a little like home. And I do think, as you said, that we have, not only is there that of God in all of us, and you should certainly continue to think that way, but also, you all have really made me feel welcome, and you in particular. So thank you for your wisdom and for your hospitality.
Maureen?
I'd like to thank you for creating a space of trust and the sense of familiarity that you bring with yourself and your personality that invites people in. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jessica?
Judy, I'd like to honor you for your spirit of generosity of sharing what you know with us in such a complete and loving way. And also your loving care that you take time to nurture us to learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica.
Jan?
Judy, I'd like to honor you for the most wonderful example of calm focus I've ever seen. You're juggling 17 or 18 people's screens and conversation and moving a presentation forward. That employs a lot of brain power and a lot of internal calm, and it is phenomenal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan. Great to have you.
Michael?
So I'll follow up with what Martha said. There's so many things that one could say, but I'll follow up. I'm not a Catholic, I'm a Methodist, and so I always feel so welcome in Judith's retreats. But more than that, I feel like anything I might say, or anybody in this room might say, Judith treats it like it's the most important thing that anyone could ever say. I mean, it's just so genuine. Gosh, and so I value that so much, and I honor you for that honoring of others.
Thank you.
Pete?
Judith, thank you for sparking some new interior revelations that have been quite instrumental for me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Pete, my fellow Benedictine Oblate. Thank you.
Melissa?
I'm echoing what Michael said, but I want to say it just anyway, that I want to honor you for the way you listen and for how you make everyone feel that what we say is just as important as what you say. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa.
Victoria?
So much to say, but my favorite phrase of the retreat was when you said, "My soul is leading my steps." And I thought about that, and I thought that describes you in every respect. We really, I think all of us, I can speak for all of us, that we really feel your soul and your spirit and everything that you're doing, and you're so humble about it. It's such a privilege for us, and thank you for sharing with us your beautiful spirit and wisdom.
Illuminata?
Even though I don't think you mentioned the word during the entire retreat, I honor you for the joy that you make apparent in the spiritual journey, because I think that's something that a lot of times we miss. It's so serious and important, but I just love that you bring out the sense of the joy that it obviously gives you. So that's number one. And the last one is that I honor you for elevating the beauty and the importance of poetry in the spiritual journey. That means a lot, especially to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom?
Judith, I first got to know you as a TV journalist through Religion and Ethics News Weekly. Later in life, I found you again in Give Us This Day with your contributions there. This is my first time knowing you in real life through the computer. You're very real. You are the real thing for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. It's so kind.
Doug?
Judy, in the spirit of our discussions about the Eucharist, I think I'd like to say that you brought a beautiful degree of care and attention and aesthetic beauty in facilitating a holy communion of pilgrims together. And so I thank you for that.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you.
Emily?
Emily, I think you're
She's
muted.
been muted all the time.
Yeah, she's been trying to get unmuted. That's why she, yeah.
Okay, I see your gesture. Thank you, my dear friend from the Merton Society. Thank you, my dear friend.
Okay. That was a silent honoring.
Yes.
Matilda?
Thank you, Judy. I just want to honor from your books and from yesterday's talk, your generosity in sharing with us the place that you were at when you discovered Gethsemane and everything that came afterwards. Thank you for showing us that you are not always perfect.
Thank you, Matilda. So honored that you were here. Thank you.
Jennifer?
This is my first retreat, and I actually tried to go to Mepkin a couple years ago with a friend, and my husband had some issues and I had to come immediately back home and didn't get to do it. And so I am so very grateful and thankful for your vulnerability and your story. And I can identify with someone who is in performance-based and trying to get out of that. And I've been on this journey, and this is part of my journey. And I was really, I'm ending my vacation with this retreat and going back to work in full-time ministry. So I'm pretty excited. But thank you all very much. I've got lots and lots of notes.
Great to have you. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Well, I think that was the greatest Christmas present I've ever gotten. Thank you so much. That was a really, what a gift. Thank you. I'm so moved. But our group bonded so beautifully, and your sharing is what made the retreat. As I always say, it's all of you who are the most important people. So thank you. Is it time for the song now, Father? Time for our closing song? Okay. We're going to start hearing about a lot of readings about peace. So I thought we would end, if the technology works, with I think it's David Haas or Marty Hogan's version of the Peace Prayer. And it's also, I think, the breastplate of St. Patrick. So that'll be our closing song, and then we could say a blessing upon all of us as we leave. So I'll share the screen again. Can you hear that?
Peace before us, peace behind us, peace under our feet. Peace within us, peace over us, let all around us be peace. Love before us, love behind us, love under our feet. Love within us, love over us, let all around us be love. Light before us, light behind us, light under
Maybe we can just all unmute and say, give each other a blessing of peace be with you.
Peace be with you.
Peace be with you.
Be with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Please stay in touch.
Thank you.
Hope to see you all again, and God bless you all in this coming year and this holiday season.
Thank you, Judy. God bless everyone.
Thank you.
Farewell.
God bless. Bye.
Bye.